better now.
Speaking.
Yes, I was wondering if I could have a police officer come to an office building. We have somebody in our building that will not leave, and he's not an employee. And apparently he
Have you asked him to leave yet?
Yeah, we have.
I will not stop until I find my family or until it's my last day in this earth.
How could a man slay not just his wife, but his 2 young stepchildren as well? That's the question we must ask when looking at the case of Luis Toledo, a man whose jealousy and violent impulses led to the brutal slaughter and mysterious disappearance of his entire family. 10 years after the incident occurred, it seems like there are more questions than answers. Did Luis Toledo, a former gang member, really take all those lives that day? How did his obsession with his 21-year-old neighbor, Tyshawn Jackson, factor into everything? Today, we'll be exploring the mysteries behind this case and attempting to explain the bizarre, tragic events that unfolded.
Today's video is sponsored by Aura, and it's a really important time to be talking about them because hackers may have stolen the Social Security numbers of every American. Over 2.9 billion records were stolen from National Public Data, which offers personal information to employers, private investigators, staffing agencies, and others doing background checks. These stolen records include a person's full name, address, date of birth, Social Security number, and phone number, along with alternate names and birth date. And members of the hacker group have reportedly released this information for free online. If you weren't taking precautions with your personal information online before, this should be a huge wake-up call. You've never been more vulnerable online than you are right now. But I'm not too worried about it because I use Aura. Aura alerts me if they find my phone number, email, or Social Security number on the dark web. They're going to let me know fast if anyone tries to use this information to access my credit or bank accounts. They give me up to $5 million in identity theft insurance should the worst-case scenario happen. They also provide a bunch of other features to keep you safe online, all inside one app. You can go to my link aura.com/into-the-deep to try 14 days for free. That will be enough time for Aura to find out if any of your personal data is exposed. I highly recommend you do this right now, because not only is National Public Data not going to do anything to help you, they probably aren't even going to face any repercussions for this leak. I'm not leaving myself and my family vulnerable to data breaches, and if you don't want to either, you can go to aura.com/into-the-deep to try 2 weeks for free.
28-year-old Yesenia Suarez was a normal woman by all accounts. She had 2 children, 9-year-old Thalia and 8-year-old Michael, who she'd been raising alone in Deltona, Florida ever since their father left the picture. The circumstances behind the father's exit from their lives are unclear, but the void he left behind was difficult to fill. Even so, Yesenia's mother, Felicita Neves, says that she was very happy with her life. She loved being a mom, her children were lively and joyful, and everything basically seemed perfect for a time. But a few years before her demise, Yesenia met a man named Luis Toledo and felt an instant attraction. Their chance encounter happened at a festival where Yesenia was attacked by a man. Toledo immediately jumped to her rescue, picking her up and taking her to the hospital to make sure she was okay. What Yesenia wanted more than anything else was a protector, and it seemed like she'd found exactly that in Toledo. Toledo was the dictionary definition of a protective, masculine lover. He was strong and never shied away from a fight, so much so that he earned the nickname Semi, owing to his fists striking people with the force of a semi-truck. Yesenia was smitten, but she had no idea about the dark past he was hiding. Later reports revealed that Toledo had been the 3rd highest-ranking member of the Latin Kings, a street gang that was involved in all sorts of crimes, including narcotics trafficking and homicide. However, by the time he met Yesenia, Toledo seemed to have left all of that behind him, even testifying against his former gang in court. Because of this, Yesenia began to trust him enough to allow him to move in. Toledo became a stepfather to her children, and for a time, Yesenia felt that things were going to get better. The couple got married, Luis started going to barber college to start a career for himself, and Yesenia claimed he was the best thing to ever happen to her. It didn't take long for the image of domestic bliss to shatter. Though he seemed more than happy to fill the role of protector, Toledo was less willing to take on the responsibilities of a provider. While Yesenia went to work at her full-time job at American Canine Solutions, Toledo would spend the day playing video games, going to the gym, and basically doing whatever he pleased. His favorite activity seemed to involve visiting his neighbor and fellow Barber College student, 21-year-old Tyshawn Jackson. Everyone in the neighborhood knew that Tyshawn had been involved in criminal activities in the past, although the exact nature of these activities haven't been revealed. The connection between him and Toledo is similarly unclear. Were they really just friends, or was something deeper and more sinister lurking under the surface? We may never know, but this relationship would become central to the violent events that followed. Regardless, Yesenia quickly grew tired of her husband's lack of discipline. They frequently got into fights over how often he played video games, and his relationship with Tyshawn was another source of friction. There was also another secret that would escalate matters down the line. In mid-2013, Toledo started to suspect his wife was having an affair with her married co-worker, Kevin Dredden. Toledo had always been the jealous type, and his suspicions seemed to send him over the edge. On October 13, 2013, Yesenia went on a business trip with Kevin, prompting Toledo to start calling her non-stop. He'd already accused her of sleeping with Kevin in the past, an accusation that Yesenia had always denied. While on the business trip, she texted her husband, telling him that he's not thinking clearly. She explained that absolutely nothing was going on between her and Dredden, but Toledo wasn't convinced. He responded to the text by asking her who has her attention if not Kevin, implying that she'd been neglecting her own husband and that someone must be taking up most of her time. The fact that he himself spent the majority of the day with Tyshawn instead of taking care of his stepchildren likely didn't occur to Toledo at the time. The fight continued over the next 3 days, so by the time Yesenia returned from the business trip, she was done with the relationship. Toledo's controlling, possessive behavior had pushed her past the point of no return, and she told him she wanted a divorce on October 16th. Toledo seemed to take the news surprisingly well, asking Yesenia to let him stay with her for 3 months so he could save up some money before moving out. Yesenia agreed, but she didn't know that she'd effectively given herself a death sentence. According to police reports, Toledo had bugged Yesenia's phone not long after she returned from the business trip. As a result, he was able to see every single message on her phone. One of these messages turned out to be an inappropriately intimate exchange between her and Kevin, where they were planning to hook up at a later date. This absolutely infuriated Toledo, who entered his car and began speeding to Yesenia's office. During this time, Yesenia desperately texted Toledo, pleading with him not to do anything rash. She claimed that the encounter between her and Dredd had been a mistake. Despite that, Toledo arrived at her office, ready to tear the whole place down. At approximately 1 p.m., a 911 call was made from Yesenia's office, with the caller stating that there was a man in the building who refused to leave.
Yes, I was wondering if I could have a police officer come to an office building. We have somebody in our building that will not leave, and he's not an employee. And apparently he
Have you asked him to leave yet?
Yeah, we have.
As police departed for the scene, Toledo stomped into the main office floor and started screaming at Yesenia and Kevin. The 911 call also happened to record Toledo's statements, with the enraged man saying that he had some incriminating messages to show his wife and her lover.
I got some messages to show you, Bobby. I got some messages to show you.
I'm sorry.
Yesenia can be heard apologizing and sobbing as her husband makes a scene. Witnesses claim that he then slapped her on the face with all his might, sending her crashing to the floor. Following this, Toledo exited the building, fleeing the sound of police sirens. He and Yesenia later met at Felicita's place to hash things out and come to terms. Did they want to continue in their relationship, or was it time to call it quits? Apparently, they mutually decided to give their relationship another shot and went home at around 7:45 p.m. This would be the last time that anyone saw Yesenia Suarez alive. No one knows exactly what happened over the next 12 hours. All we have to go on is testimony from Toledo and reports from the police investigation. Even so, we can stitch together the approximate sequence of events that led to the demise of Yesenia and her children. At around 3 in the morning, Toledo claims that he ran into Tyshawn outside. He complained about how his wife never let him play video games at home, but then decided to just go for it anyway since it was his home too. The pair started gaming, and when Yesenia heard them, she apparently came outside and started screaming at Toledo. However, the ensuing investigation revealed this version of events to be completely false. This means that Toledo and Yesenia were alone at home, and any altercation they got into had nothing to do with the culprit and Tyshawn playing video games. One thing we do know for sure is that Toledo slammed his hand into Yesenia's throat in the early hours of October 23rd. The force of the blow was so severe that it shattered her windpipe, with Toledo watching as she died in front of his eyes. Toledo claims that Yesenia attacked him first, even trying to show scratch marks on his back to prove it.
Going off on me, whatever, da-da-da, and she told, and she wanted everybody to leave. She wanted me to get out the house. I told her I didn't have to go. She came at me, grabbed me on the back. Yeah. She grabbed me from the back. I just got upset. I got so tired of her grabbing on me. I couldn't get her up the neck. She fell down on the floor, holding her neck, looking at me. She couldn't breathe.
However, the fact that these marks weren't presented as evidence by his defense suggests that he completely made up this detail. Either way, the argument that preceded Toledo's vicious attack was so loud that it woke up the kids. Thalia and Michael rushed out of their bedroom to find their mom dead on the floor, and their stepdad looming over her. Once again, there are two versions of the events that followed. According to Toledo, who maintained that Tyshawn was there the entire time, he told his neighbor to take the children to the bathroom so that they wouldn't be traumatized by their mother's corpse. Toledo claims that he then heard the children screaming, and when he opened the bathroom door, he found Tyshawn standing over their dead bodies with a bloody axe in his hands. However, evidence found at the crime scene basically confirms this story to be false. Forensic analysts noted that there was hardly any blood spatter on the walls. Instead, there were just a few drops here and there. If the perpetrator had used an axe as the homicide weapon, it would have left considerable spatter in every corner. The type of spatter they found suggests that a blunt object was used, and the actual object hints at the sheer brutality of the attack Toledo committed. What could this object have been? Before we get into that, we must first discuss the discovery of the crime and the investigation that followed. On the morning of October 23rd, Yesenia's mother became suspicious when she didn't receive her regular morning call from her daughter. This prompted her to call her daughter several times, only for her calls to go unanswered. By this point, Felicita was all but certain that something bad had happened. She had a sinking feeling in her stomach, a sense of impending doom, and she just had to drive over there to find out what happened. She called the police before heading out, arriving at the same time as the deputies.
I haven't heard from my daughter since last night. I know she was having some issues with her husband.
And you think maybe she's endangered by her husband?
Yes, ma'am.
Moments later, Toledo pulls up in his car looking perfectly calm and collected. When Felicita asks him where her daughter is, Toledo says that she left with the kids at some point last night. His ruse wasn't going to last, though. Police soon ask him to let them inside, and when they enter, they're overwhelmed by the smell of Lysol. This might not have been enough to arrest him on its own, but Toledo was already wanted for the assault at the office the previous day. The police were able to bring him in, and Felicita was left to wonder what became of her grandchildren. Surely Yesenia wouldn't have just run off with them, she thought. She decided to call the school to see if they were there, and felt like her heart had fallen out of her chest when school officials said they hadn't shown up that morning. Felicita was now certain that Toledo had done something terrible to her daughter and grandchildren, and police got to work trying to put the pieces together. The scene of the apparent crime was cordoned off, and police started scouring the family home for clues. An investigator found spots of blood in the bathroom, where they'd later realized the children were slain. The police were still treating this as a missing persons case due to the lack of bodies, but this was soon about to change. For now, Toledo maintained that his wife wasn't missing and that she could very well be with her lover, Kevin. However, Kevin's wife confirmed that he'd been with her all night. The case took a shocking turn when none other than Tyshawn Jackson approached police to tell them something critical. Shortly after 6 in the morning, he'd received a call from Toledo claiming that his wife was missing and he needed his help in moving her car. He never explained why he needed to move her car, and Tyshawn didn't question his friend's motivations. Toledo drove his wife's car while Tyshawn followed in Toledo's vehicle, and once they arrived, the neighbor witnessed the culprit wiping Yesenia's car down. They then drove to a nearby dumpster, where Toledo disposed of empty bottles of cleaning chemicals and the mat from the trunk of his car. Toledo returned to the car and told Tyshawn that he had just snapped. Shaken by this strange behavior, Tyshawn told Toledo to drop him off at a convenience store, where he was captured on surveillance footage waiting in line. When police located the dumpster, they found a pair of boots wrapped up in the trunk mat with blood on them. This indicates that Toledo had either stomped or kicked at least one or two of the victims to death, and possibly all of them. With the new evidence and Tyshawn's testimony, police were able to go back to Toledo with a new approach. They showed him pictures of his family, which sparked an intensely emotional reaction from the perpetrator. Between sobs, he confessed to shattering his wife's windpipe, but claimed that Tyshawn was the one that took the children's lives with an axe.
Okay, because that's where you're having that issue. Yeah, we can move on. We can move on.
I don't know how bad I want to kill him. I really wanted to kill him, but anybody needs to die, it was him.
You want to talk about him? Now, you went over, he had the left hand, something in his left hand, or right hand?
It was in his right hand.
His right hand. And it was can you describe it, exactly how it looked?
Brown wooden handle, black tape on it, and it was rusted.
As we've said previously, investigators concluded that Tyshawn wasn't involved with the actual crime. There's a chance that Toledo knew he was out of options. During the interrogation, he kept asking to go to the bathroom, claiming that he was experiencing stomach problems. During one of these visits, he shattered the bathroom mirror, picked up one of the shards, and began slashing at his arms. His attempt to take his own life failed, with police breaking down the door, dragging him out, and sending him to get medical attention.
He used the bathroom, my stomach hurts.
You got his bathroom again?
My stomach hurts.
Okay. Let's make sure it's clear.
He's able to barricade himself in the bathroom. He breaks a mirror, takes the glass from the mirror, and begins to start cutting himself.
Despite the failure of the attempt, it's a strong sign that Toledo had a guilty conscience. His attempt to explain his wife's disappearance had failed, as did his claims that Tyshawn was the one behind the children losing their lives. Right before this incident, Toledo basically admitted that he knew where the bodies were and that he'd never confessed their location. Regardless, the police had enough evidence to charge Toledo with 2 counts of homicide in the 2nd degree, 1 count of homicide in the 3rd degree, and an additional count of tampering with physical evidence. Due to Toledo's background as an enforcer for the Latin kings, authorities were sure that he had the knowledge required to dispose of the bodies.
Knowledge of how to clean a crime scene, how to dispose of evidence, how to dispose of bodies. He was
the expert at that.
He was.
What's more, he appeared to flash gang signs at one point during his trial. This seems to suggest that he was threatening the prosecution, but his signaling was noticed by the judge and led to a stern reprimand. Even though he was out of options, Toledo didn't seem willing to give up his violent ways. During the trial, several witnesses came forward to testify against him, including Kevin Dredden and Tyshawn Jackson. Kevin spoke about the assault at the office, telling the court that Toledo had immediately become violent with his wife. As for Tyshawn, he denied any involvement in the actual crime, and the evidence seemed to support this. On top of that, the young man broke down into sobs at the implication that he could have slain the children, saying that he liked them and that they were good kids.
You like the kids?
They're nice kids.
Do you feel close to them?
Yes.
Do you have anything to do with their death?
No.
The most damning evidence of all was Toledo's own confession, which the defense desperately wanted to suppress. Their efforts went in vain, with the judge allowing all of Toledo's statements to become part of the record. Between his confession and Tyshawn's heartfelt testimony, the jury were convinced.
The verdict appears to be in proper order. Will the defendant please rise, face the jury, and hearken to the verdict? Madam Clerk, publish the verdict.
In the Circuit Court of the 7th Judicial Circuit in Fort St. Johns County, Florida, State of Florida versus Lewis Toledo, case number 2013-102-888, CFDF. Verdict. Count one, murder of Michael Elijah Otto. We, the jury, find the defendant Lewis Toledo as to count one of the indictment as follows. Guilty of first-degree murder as charged in the indictment. Count two, first-degree murder of Thalia Otto. We, the jury, find the defendant Lewis Toledo as to count two of the indictment as follows. Guilty of first-degree murder as charged in the indictment. Count three, second-degree murder of Yesenia Suarez. We, the jury, find the defendant Lewis Toledo as to count three of the indictment as follows. Guilty of the charge of second-degree murder as charged in the indictment. Count four, tampering with physical evidence. We, the jury, find the defendant Lewis Toledo as to count four of the indictment, guilty of the charge of tampering with physical evidence. So say we all, dated in St. Augustine, St. Johns County, Florida, this 27th day of October 2017, Miller, Fort Worth.
Toledo was the man behind this twisted incident, and he deserved to be punished to the fullest extent of the law. 10 of the 12 jury members wanted Toledo to get the death penalty, but since the law requires a unanimous verdict, the perpetrator was able to escape with his life. Even so, the judge noted that he showed zero remorse during the trial and sentenced him to 3 consecutive life sentences behind bars. More than a decade later, Felicita Neves continues to hold memorials for her daughter and grandchildren. She's become a vocal activist, raising awareness about domestic violence and the loss it can cause. Her family is gone forever, but police and prosecutors managed to ensure that he'll never hurt anyone again.
The jurors were asked that if you were remorseful about the killings. By a vote of 12-0, they said no. Not even the 2 people who voted to spare your life found any remorse in your actions or your statements. I totally concur with their findings. I don't believe you're remorseful. And as such, you will receive no mercy from the court.
However, the bodies of Yesenia Suarez and her children, Thalia and Otto, haven't been found to this very day. What do you think of this case? Did Luis Toledo get the sentence he deserved, or should prosecutors have pushed for the death penalty? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you want more videos like this, please be sure to like the video, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss out on more true crime videos. Take care, and see you in the next one.